Sureka Bhaskar here to present the daily news analysis for you. So for today's discussion, we've actually picked up a number of topics from the reputed daily, that is the Hindu, which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. So if you actually look at the topics that we've actually picked up, the first topic is nothing but it is taking stock of global nuclear disarmament. So this particular article discusses about the concept of nuclear weapons. Moving on, it discusses about what is nuclear disarmament and what are the global initiatives and treaties, the agreements that were actually that was signed for the same purpose, whether India has signed it, why not India has actually not ratified these treaties, and what are the implications on India becomes very, very important. And also 26th of September has been observed by the United Nations as the International Day for the elimination of nuclear weapons. So this is what the first topic actually discusses about. Moving on, if you see, the second topic discusses about ADB, that is nothing but it is the Asian Development Bank. This has actually raised the inflation view on the food, less sanguine on the early rate cut. So this particular article discusses about the projections or the forecast that the Asian Development Bank has actually done with respect to that of the inflation in India as well as GDP. This particular article talks that ADB has actually revised its methods for forecasting or projecting India's inflation because there has been food inflation or increase in the price of food products of late. So this is what we'll discuss here. And with respect to our examination for the prelims perspective, here Asian Development Bank is important, and also discussing about the inflation trends in India, how it is actually calculated, and what is the role of RBI through the Monetary Policy Committee in order to control this inflation. We'll be discussing about the different rates or the economic indicators like the repo rates, the reverse repo, then the SLR, the CRR, etc. over here, which becomes very, very important from the prelims perspective. Moving on, the third article discusses about China tests ICBM, that is Intercontinental Missile, in the Pacific Ocean. So this particular article, as the title suggests, discusses about the ICBM, that is nothing but the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. Here, from science and tech as well as security perspective, what is important for us to understand is the concept of what is a ballistic missile, how it is different from that of the cruise missile, and what are the functions, and in what way India is actually progressing in the development of these cruise and ballistic missiles, etc. will be actually discussed over here. So moving forward, this is actually the first article from the prelims perspective that we will actually be discussing about, where China has tested the intercontinental missile in the Pacific Ocean. This has actually raised further concerns due to, because China is already posing certain economic constraints on several countries, especially the developing countries like India. And in addition to that, this actually talks about China's military expansion. Okay, so this has actually signaled a threat to the rest of the countries in the world. So moving forward, let us actually discuss this particular article. So over here, we will be discussing about what are ballistic missiles and how these are actually different from that of the cruise missile. So ballistic versus cruise missile becomes very important for the examination. And moving forward, we'll actually be looking into the concept of intercontinental ballistic missiles. That is one of the kind of ballistic missiles, and the other include the short range as well as the long range, etc. So we'll be discussing about that. So this particular topic becomes very important for both your prelims examination and for the mains examination. We can map it to GS paper 3, science and technology, developments and their applications and their effects in everyday life. Now moving forward, as I actually told you, China has recently conducted a rare intercontinental ballistic missile, that is the ICBM test, launching it into the Pacific Ocean. And as I told you, this has actually raised global concerns over its expanding military capabilities. So now let us actually move into the concept that becomes very, very important for the examination. So over here, Just give me a minute as I just skip through the next slide. Yeah. So first, what is important for us is to understand what is this concept of ballistic missiles. Okay. So as you see over here, what is a ballistic missile? It is nothing but it is a particular weapon that actually uses rocket propulsion in order to follow a high arching trajectory or a ballistic path over most of the flight. So here, to actually explain in simple terms, ballistic missiles are those which actually follow a ballistic trajectory. What do you mean by ballistic trajectory? For example, these ballistic missiles initially actually require, a propulsion. So once it is actually propelled from the ground, it actually moves to the atmosphere and then reaches the outer space and then reaches back to the target point through by following this particular trajectory, and this is called as a ballistic trajectory. Okay, so these are ballistic paths. So initially it actually requires a guided propulsion, and later on it actually reaches the target point by gravity. So this is what it's told here. It is a weapon that uses the rocket propulsion, that is, it is guided in order to follow a high arching trajectory, which is this trajectory through the atmosphere, then moving to the outer space, or it is also called as the ballistic path over most of the flight. So this is what it is. And after being launched and guided during the initial powered phase, so it is guided during the propulsion and the initial powered phase, the missile coasts in an unpowered free fall motion. That is what I told you. It actually follows a free fall motion under gravity, and here there is no guided propulsion that is actually given. Okay, so here free fall motion relying on gravity to reach its target. And moving on, the ballistic missiles can be used to deliver various types of warheads. It is very, very important. What is actually the application of ballistic missiles? It is used to deliver various types of warheads, which actually includes the conventional explosives, the nuclear chemicals, and it also includes the biological payloads. Okay, so this is what you need to understand about a ballistic missile. Now moving forward, if you actually look at this particular image, this is what is the representation of a ballistic missile. You can say here it is the ballistic missile. It actually follows this particular trajectory, that is through the atmosphere. You can see this atmosphere goes to the outer space and then it actually reaches and free falls through gravity. So this is what it is, and however it is actually different from that of the cruise missiles. Okay, how it is different from that of the cruise missiles is what we will actually see in the next slide, in the forthcoming ones. Yeah, now let us actually, before understanding what is the difference between the ballistic missile as well as the cruise missile, it is important for us to understand what are the different types of these ballistic missiles. Okay, so ballistic missiles can actually be of different types, that is the short range ballistic missiles, then the medium range ballistic missiles, then we have the intermediate range as well as the intercontinental ballistic missiles. Now let us actually look at their characteristic features, which is very, very important for your prelims examination. So over here, first one is the short range ballistic missiles. What is the meaning of short range ballistic missiles is that they have a range of up to 1000 kilometers. This becomes very, very important for your examination, and they are used for different types of tactical operations, okay, on the battlefield. And here, for example, is the Prithvi 2 missile, and this actually has a range of over 350 kilometers. Okay, so this is a short range ballistic missile. And moving forward, the next one is the medium range ballistic missile, that is the MRBM. So if you actually see here, they have a range of about 1000 to over 3500 kilometers. And what are they specifically designed for is to strike the strategic targets in the neighboring region. So this is very, very important. And again, Yeah. So as we were discussing about the types of ballistic missiles, let us actually continue with the same. So we were discussing about the short range ballistic missiles as well as the medium range ballistic missiles. So over here, as I discussed, Prithvi 2 missile is actually, over a range of 350 kilometers, and moving forward we saw the medium range ballistic missiles, and they actually have a range of over 1000 to 3500 kilometers, and specifically designed in order to hit the targets in the neighboring regions. An example actually include Agni 2. This actually has a range of over 2000 kilometers, and if you see Agni 3, this actually has a range of over 3000 kilometers. So all these data become very, very important for your prelims examination. Now moving forward is the next type of ballistic missile, that is nothing but intermediate range ballistic missile. This actually has a target, or it has a range of over 3500 to around 5500 kilometers, and these can actually target locations in the adjacent continents as well. So again, very, very important. And for example is the Agni 4 missile, which actually has a range of around 4000 kilometers. So these examples become very important for you. Now moving on is the intercontinental ballistic missile, and this is what China has actually recently tested. So what are they? They actually have a range which actually exceeds more than about 5500 kilometers, and are intended for long range strategic nuclear strikes. An example over here is Agni 5, which actually has a range of more than 5500 kilometers. Okay, so these are the different types of the ballistic missiles that we actually saw. Now moving forward, let us actually look into what is the major difference between the ballistic missiles as well as the cruise missiles. Okay, so a comparative note between the ballistic missiles as well as the cruise missile, as you can see over here. The first one is the method of propulsion. Okay, so first one is nothing but it is the method of propulsion. As I told you, the ballistic missiles are rocket powered. So these are rocket powered. They actually require a rocket for their propulsion, and these are guided in the beginning. Okay, however, during their fall, it actually falls with free fall due to gravity. So this is what is a propulsion method. However, if you see, in case of cruise missiles, these are air breathing, where you actually use a jet or a propeller driven, where it has a jet engine which is installed throughout. That is, as it is propelled, as it moves through the atmosphere and it actually falls down, this is actually powered by the jet engine. So this is the method of propulsion. The next one, with respect to that of the speed, here it actually has a speed that is subsonic or supersonic. What do you mean by sonic? It is actually the, sorry, okay, can I do that little later? Yeah, so if you see the speed of these missiles, first one, it is actually subsonic or supersonic. What do you mean by sonic? It is actually the speed of sound. Okay, so if it is lesser than that, it is called as subsonic, and if it is greater than that, it is called as supersonic. And this is slower comparatively to that of your ballistic missiles, which is actually supersonic, or hypersonic, which means it is much faster. Next, moving on, looking at the altitude over here through which to it actually reaches includes the low or the near earth surface, whereas in contrast this is high, often into space, and then it actually descends down to the earth or free fall due to gravity. Next one, the maneuverability. Here it is actually high degree of in-flight maneuverability, and here it is actually limited. Next one, the range. I told you this is typically a longer range, and for in case of ballistic missiles, if you specifically see the ICBMs, that is the Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, they have a longer range. Next, if you see the targeting accuracy of the cruise missiles, it has high precision because it is guided throughout its flight and the descent. And if you see the ballistic missiles, it is less precise due to the ballistic trajectory. Next one is tactical use. Here, it is precise and the precision strikes on specific targets, and over here it is strategic long range attacks on cities, military bases, etc. Next one, detectability. These cruise missiles are harder to detect due to the low altitude because the flight and the descent is limited to the layers of the atmosphere itself, and it does not go to the outer space. Whereas if you see the ballistic missiles, due to its higher range as well as the altitude, it is easier to detect during the boost phase itself. And here if you see, examples with respect to India of the cruise missiles include the BrahMos missile as well as the Nirbhay. Whereas if you see the ballistic missiles, examples with respect to India, it includes Prithvi 1, Prithvi 2, Agni 1, Agni 2, as well as the Dhanush missiles. So here are the basic examples between what is a ballistic missile and what is a cruise missile. Okay. And also, now let us actually move forward in order to understand. Yeah. So with this, we had actually, completed the comparison between what is a ballistic missile, what is cruise missile, and how it is important for the examination. So now, if you actually look at us, that is our team, Narayana IAS Academy, we actually have, different products that are actually curated for, in order to make it very easier for you guys to prepare for the examination. So this curation is actually based on intense research that we do as a team here in order to ease the burden of the aspirants that they generally face. For example, if you take the Navigator magazine, so it is one of the best curated magazines in the market. Why I actually vouch for it is that after intense research, after going through the PYQs, after thoroughly understanding the theme and the thematic importance that UPSC focuses on, we've actually designed this Navigator magazine. We have actually not only restricted ourselves to the reputed dailies like the Hindu as well as the Indian Express, we also, refer to the magazines like the Science Reporter. We do not leave Yojna, Kurukshetra. So ultimately, we leave no stone unturned. So we actually do all the research and provide everything on your platter literally in order to ease your preparation for the examination. So such is the Navigator magazine. So in case of current affairs, any kind of doubts you actually have with respect to the magazine or any of the topic which is actually there. For example, if you take international relations, generally the doubt the student actually faces will be like they do not understand the geopolitical dynamics and what role India actually has there, whether it actually acts as a peacemaker or whatever it is. So in that case, you can actually your one-stop solution will be the Navigator magazine, and in case of any doubt beyond that, you can actually reach out to us, as we have a specialized R&D team over here who will be more than happy to guide you. And also our Navigator GS advanced course, where this is also an extended work of our team, where we actually focus on high quality as well as curative content on different GS subjects over GS 1, 2, 3 and 4, as you know how important these papers are for both your prelims as well as the mains examination. So please do join us in order to make your so please do join us in order to make yourself, updated with the current affairs as well as other general studies topic. So moving forward, let us actually deal with the next topic that we've actually picked up for the discussion today. This is nothing but taking stock of global nuclear disarmament. So this is a very, very important mains topic that we've actually picked up today. So here, what we'll be discussing about is today being the 26th of September. So it has been observed by the United Nations as the International Day for Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. Okay. So here, we'll be discussing about what do you mean by nuclear weapons and what is this particular concept of nuclear proliferation. So this actually becomes very, very important for your mains examination. However, the agreement signed, whether India is a signatory, whether India has ratified it, why it hasn't, what will be the implications in case India has to sign or ratify it, all that is very important. And what are the different kind of agreements that have been signed, all that becomes important for your prelims examination. So here, as you see, we will be discussing about the concept of nuclear proliferation, and also we'll be okay, let's continue here. So here we'll be discussing about nuclear proliferation, and also we'll be discussing about nuclear disarmament. And this particular topic becomes very, very important for both your prelims and mains, and especially for your mains examination under GS paper 2, effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest. So this is what we'll be looking into. Okay, now just going through the comment section. So comment section actually has certain doubt as to why China is going to war. Okay, so actually the topic that we've dealt with is we are not discussing about why China is going to war. We are just discussing about why China is actually expanding its military capabilities and this expansion, how it is going to have an impact on the geopolitics of the other countries. So this is what is important for your mains examination. So we need to focus on that aspect with respect to this question. So Praveen has asked me this question, and the successive comments I think are in Telugu. So I think it will be better if we actually stick to English because I'm not very fluent and I don't understand the language of Telugu, so that will be better. So any other doubts you actually have with respect to the topics that we are dealing with, you can ask. That is why we've actually started this live initiative, because it will be more interactive and we'll be able to solve your doubts then and there as we are discussing the topic. And also one of the disclaimer I would like to say is that when we are discussing important topics like international relations and other things, it is better that we actually focus on the topics that is given here, because we actually mention the UPSC relevance and the syllabus. It is always good to think out of the box, but also it is important for you to understand which facts are relevant and which are irrelevant for the examination. So we need to what to say, put aside the irrelevant kind of thinking that is actually going inside and focus on what is being taught, and post that we can actually ask our questions. So moving forward, the nuclear proliferation that we are actually talking about. Yes, so as we discussed, on September 26th, the United Nations actually observes the International Day for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. For this concept, first we need to understand what is this concept of nuclear weapons. Okay, so let us actually move forward and understand what is this concept of nuclear weapons, and then understand what is this concept of nuclear proliferation. Yeah. So here we actually have what do you mean by nuclear weapons. So generally you will know what are these nuclear weapons, right? The term itself actually says that these are highly destructive devices, and these actually, when they are what to say, the making of this particular device as well as usage actually releases enormous amount of energy which causes mass destruction. Okay, because the processes that are involved here include nuclear fission as well as nuclear fusion. Here again, this nuclear fission and fusion becomes very, very important for your science perspective. Fission is nothing but it is division of an atom, that is a heavy element in layman's term, dividing that into a number of lighter elements, that is called as fission. And here next one is called as nuclear fusion. This is nothing but when two lighter elements actually combine in order to form a heavier element or an atom, that is called nuclear fusion. So here nuclear weapons are destructive devices that actually release enormous amount of energy through the process of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, which are both nuclear processes. Okay, nuclear fission example is atom bombs. I actually told you what is the division taking place there, and fusion is an example. Here you have hydrogen bombs. Now moving forward, these weapons actually have the capacity to cause mass destruction, as I told you, and they also have a long lasting environmental impact, and also it impacts the health of an individual to a greater extent. For example, you can say the first use of the nuclear weapon, it actually occurred during the World War, and when the US, that is the United States, dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th of August 1945, again very important, resulting in widespread devastation and loss of life. So after having understood what do you mean by the nuclear weapons, it is important for us to understand the concept of nuclear proliferation. Okay, so what do you mean by nuclear proliferation is another concept which is very, very important for our discussion. So if you see, these are nuclear weapons, and the aftermath of it is very, very catastrophic, as you can actually see in this particular image. Now let us move on to further for our discussion. Yeah. So now it is important for us to discuss about this particular concept, proliferation of nuclear weapons. So nuclear proliferation is nothing but it is the spread of nuclear weapon technology to the nations that do not currently have any kind of nuclear technology. So this is called as nuclear proliferation. So it is the spread of nuclear weapons technology to nations that do not currently possess them. And since the first nuclear test that I told you in 1945, what are the nations that actually possess them? That is also very important, whether India has it or not, and who are the immediate neighbors of India who possess this nuclear weapon, because of which what will be the possible implications, all this become important. So since the test in 1945, 9 nations have acquired nuclear capabilities. That is, this is very important. Okay, so one is United States, next is Russia, then you have the United Kingdom, then you have France, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, as well as North Korea. So this is very important. Okay, whether India actually possess nuclear weapons or not is a very important thing you know. So as of 2022, if you see, an estimated 12,700 nuclear warheads exist globally, with Russia and the United States holding about 90% of the total. So out of the 13,000 nuclear warheads, 90% is actually owned by the United States, or it is possessed by the United States as well as Russia. If you take, for example, India and Pakistan, we have also steadily increased their arsenals, that is possession of nuclear warheads, each possessing around 170 nuclear warheads. Okay, so this does not mean India is actually ready for a war. Okay, so India follows certain rules like, no first use policy and other, deterrence policy, etc. So we will actually look into that one by one. So moving forward, let us see what have been the global efforts that have been put in place in order to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. So if we actually discuss one by one, here whenever it comes to any kind of treaty or any kind of agreements that have been signed, or the global convention, whether it is, international, or whether it is respect to that of environmental agreements, it's very important to understand what are the outcomes of it, what has been India's stand in it, whether India is a signatory or not, whether India has ratified the convention or not, whether it is a part of UN SDG or not, what has been the progress of India, whether there has been a particular upper threshold that has been fixed for it, for example the Paris agreement. Okay, all those things is very important. So here, similarly, we are discussing about global efforts to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. So what is the first one? Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, that is the NPT. This is the first one that we'll be discussing. Okay, so when this was signed, it was actually signed in the year 1968. So it was signed in the year 1968 and entered into force in 1970. And the NPT actually aims to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and promote disarmament. That is basically in order to establish peace, it was actually signed. Okay, so this is what is the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of the Nuclear Weapons. Moving on, it divides the world into two nuclear weapon states. Okay, that is the NWS. That is, these are the nuclear weapon states, that is whichever actually possess the nuclear warheads, and the other one are the non-nuclear weapon states, that is the NNWS, which actually agree not to develop or acquire nuclear weapons. Okay, and it requires NWS, that is the countries which actually possess the nuclear weapon, to pursue the disarmament negotiations in good faith. Okay, so what do you actually understand by this is, just a minute. Okay, so what you understand by this one is, see, this particular treaty on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, this divides the entire global community into two. The first one is the nuclear weapon states, and the second one is non-nuclear weapon states. Okay, so you might wonder why I'm actually laughing. There's something that happened over here, that is why. So okay, now let us get back to our discussion. So global community is divided into two. That is the nuclear weapon states and the non-nuclear weapon states. Nuclear weapon states, those who actually possess the nuclear weapons, and the next one are the category who don't possess. And this particular treaty actually focuses on negotiating with the countries that actually possess the nuclear weapons in order to disarm them. That is, disarmament is actually required, is what it is speaking of. And India is one of the very important. India is one of only 4 countries that never signed the NPT. And what are the other countries are also important, okay? So this actually includes Israel, Pakistan and South Sudan. And India has stayed out of this NPT because it views the treaty as discriminatory. So this is very important. And also, if you see which is the country which actually withdrew from this particular treaty NPT is North Korea, and this actually happened in year 2003. So these kind of statics points are also important for you to understand. As once there was a question among the BRICS, which was the country which joined us the last, whether India was a founding member or not, and which is the country which actually has major shareholding in case of a bank or etc. All these kind of questions become important. The next treaty is that the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which is nothing but it's called as CTBT. Okay, so this was actually opened for signature in the year 1996. So here you might actually have a doubt, what is the difference between signing it and ratifying it? Signing is nothing but India actually choosing or acknowledging that such a treaty exists, and it is actually a good measure or whatever it is. India acknowledges the presence of that agreement, whereas ratifying it is that it is passed or it is taken up for discussion in the parliament, and the provisions of which is actually followed or practiced or implemented in the country on a serious note. So that is called as ratification. So the CTBT was actually opened for signature in the year 1996, and it actually aims to ban all the nuclear explosions for both civilian and military purposes. And while the treaty has been signed by 185 countries and ratified by 170, so this is what I told you, differences between signing of a treaty and ratification of a treaty. It has not come to effect due to non-ratification by major powers like the United States as well as China. So this is what is something we need to understand. Okay, so moving forward, let us actually understand the next treaty. The next treaty is nothing but a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. So this was actually adopted by the United Nations in the year 2017. Again important, and it was opened for signature in 2018, and this aims to prohibit the development, the testing, the stockpiling, the production, the stationing, the transfer, use and the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. And this actually represents a significant step towards nuclear disarmament, although it has not been signed by the nuclear armed states. Again, very important. Here also, India has not signed it. Again, very important to know. The next one is nuclear supply groups. Okay, on this there was a question in the prelims examination, so an important area of focus. So this is nothing but a group of nuclear supplier countries that seek to contribute to the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. That is, it is basically there in order to stop the proliferation or the spreading of the nuclear weapons into any kind of any other country through the implementation of 2 sets of guidelines for nuclear exports as exports. And that is, it actually includes the export or the import of uranium and all those fission materials and nuclear materials for this particular purpose. And following India's nuclear test in 1974, the NSG was actually created. Again, very important. Whether India is a member of NSG or not, no, India is not a member of NSG as well. So here these are the different global efforts that actually had to put this nuclear disarmament under or nuclear proliferation under control. Now, let us understand certain basic things. What are the debates around nuclear disarmament? Okay, so whether what kind of risk or the consequences, or what is the concept of deterrence that it actually talks about. There are different challenges on non-proliferation. What are the geopolitical realities and the implications on India? All this again becomes important for discussion. Okay, so if we are discussing about the debates around the nuclear disarmament, first we'll talk about the risk and the consequences. Okay, So as I told you, the nuclear weapons have catastrophic humanitarian and environmental consequences. That is, there is also the fear of the accidental nuclear war due to miscalculations or technical malfunction. So possessing in itself poses a risk is what is talking about. Next is there is a difference between deterrence versus disarmament. Okay, here nuclear deterrence is nothing but the idea that nuclear weapons prevent war by deterring the adversaries from attacking. For example, take the US versus Russia. If US possesses the nuclear weapons, what do you mean by deterrence? Russia would not even come near the US thinking of a war because it's scared that US would retaliate or start the attack by this nuclear weapon. So that is called as deterrence. Whereas there have been criticisms also that deterrence policies are unsustainable, especially with that of modern geopolitical tensions. Okay, so here deterrents are unsustainable because of a lot of the geopolitical volatility, such as those you actually see between Israel, Palestine, you see between Russia, Ukraine, as well as recently you see, Israel, Lebanon, etc. So this is what it talks about. Next is the non-proliferation challenges. While the NPT has, had successes, you have seen that non-proliferation treaty actually had success. But if you see countries like North Korea have withdrawn and developed nuclear weapons, this actually challenges the global non-proliferation efforts. Next, if you see geopolitical realities, nations like India, Pakistan, as well as Israel argue that nuclear weapons are essential for their national security, especially in volatile regions, making the push for global disarmament challenging. Okay, so moving forward, let us actually see what have been the, what are the other arguments that it actually talks about. So moving forward, it is important for us to know what is the Indian perspective. Okay, what has been India's involvement, or what has been, India's growth with respect to that of nuclear doctrine. When was it signed, and what is it? Who manages it, etc. All this becomes important. So India's nuclear doctrine is based on the principle of credible minimum deterrence. Okay, so India does not develop these nuclear weapons in order to threaten any other country, but in order to make them aware that we too are actually ready for any kind of adversity or adversity. So, and we also use a no first use policy. That is, India would never attack, or it would never actually start the use of nuclear weapons as of in the first place. So credible minimum deterrence that we discussed here is that the nuclear arsenals will be minimum enough to provide credible deterrence against the adversaries, and no first use actually implies that India will not use nuclear weapons unless it is first attacked by an adversary using the same. Next, what do you mean by retaliatory strike? Is that India maintains the right to retaliate. That is, in case it is attacked by an adversary, India has the right to retaliate massively if attacked with nuclear weapons. So this is one of the important thing about the India's nuclear doctrine. Now moving forward, let us actually see under whose control is it in. Most of us would actually think that the nuclear weapons and everything comes under the army, right? But it is not so. Let us actually see whom does it actually fall under. So the doctrine emphasizes strict civilian control. Here this civilian control is nothing but it is the nuclear command authority. Okay, so this actually consists of a political council and it consists of an executive council. Let us actually see. So the doctrine emphasizes strict civilian control over India's nuclear arsenal, ensuring that only highest levels of government can actually authorize the nuclear strikes. Okay, it is not in the hands of the army to just take the decision and to retaliate by using these nuclear weapons. Okay, so that is where this nuclear command authority actually becomes very, very important. So what is this nuclear command authority? This is responsible for controlling, for commanding and making operational decisions about India's nuclear weapons. It is made up of both the political council and executive council, where the political council is chaired by the Prime Minister, and this is the only body that can authorize any kind of nuclear strikes. This is very, very important. And what actually constitutes this executive council is that it is chaired by the National Security Advisor. Here again his role becomes very, very important. You need to know about him, and this council advises the NCA and carries out orders from this particular political council. Next one is global disarmament. This is also a part of India's nuclear doctrine. So India actually supports the global nuclear disarmament, and it actually emphasizes the need for non-discriminatory nuclear agreements. Okay, because the past agreements like the CTBT, etc., India actually felt that it is very, very discriminatory, and it is supportive of the nations which actually possess that more. Next one, it also feels that we need to allow countries to maintain national security. So India feels that nuclear weapons are actually not mandatory, but it is required in order to maintain, or in order to prevent any kind of attack on the security. So this is what is actually the India's nuclear doctrine. Now moving forward, yeah. So moving forward, now this is actually the next topic that we'll be discussing. So before that, let's actually look at few of the doubts that have actually been raised on this particular topic. What will India do with ICBM? We don't have enemy at such a far location. So see, having an enemy at a far location, or at a proximity, that does not matter. The development of technology and how far India has actually gone in order to achieve this milestone of having ICBM, and it's always prevention is better than cure, right? So this is always to maintain the security of the country. Okay, so that is what it is. And next one is for India as a part of IPEF and Quad group. So why is Quad actually being discussed over here? I do not understand. We'll actually, turn one stone at a time rather than focusing on all the, international groupings and agreements, etc. So whatever is the focus here related to that, let's actually get the doubts cleared. What about small nuclear weapons used in war zones as happened in Lebanon? Okay, so Mohammed Shan has actually asked it. So, what about it? As in, like, what are you trying to ask? I'm not able to understand whether it has any kind of agreement or policies controlling it, or what are you asking? I do not know. And recent Lebanon attack was actually, it was it was actually said that it was taken done by the Israelis because of the long lasting Israel Palestine conflict also. So there's a lot of history behind it, which we need to actually clear it. Next is, has India ever, Varun has asked, has India ever used nuclear weapons? No, we haven't. Surrounded, madam, given India is surrounded by two big enemies, Pakistan and China, is it wrong to proliferate our nuclear arsenal? Like, as I always told you, prevention is better than cure. It is better to actually focus on these strategies and technologies, looking at what the West, it always keeps itself prepared. So that is what India is actually focusing on. And however, here it is important for us to focus on what are the part of the doctrine that India follows. Okay, so whether it is wrong or right, we do not say, because India always follows that middle path. Okay, that is, it is always NAM. So it does not incline towards the left or the right. It is always prepared in case of any kind of adversarial strike. So that is what it is. So yes, so moving forward, now let us actually take up the last topic that we'll be discussing with respect to that of the prelims perspective. Okay, so here this particular topic becomes important. ADB raises inflation view on food. See, whenever you read the newspaper, it might actually appear to you that these language and all, it is very verbose, and the vocabulary is very high. So in that case, we are here to actually break it down for you, so you can religiously trust us and follow the DNA analysis. So 3 topics a day, that actually makes around 18 topics a week. So this kind of focus clubbed with your magazine as well as brushing up your concepts from the GS books is called an integrated plan. Okay, so this is how you need to prepare for the examination. So even if you look at this particular topic here, the what to say, the header actually looks very difficult. That is, ADB raises inflation, we want food less sanguine on early rate cut. Nothing is actually important here. What is very important here is to know about this particular grouping, that is the Asian Development Bank. Okay, so who are the members of it and what is the major objective, whether India is a part of it or not, and who is the highest shareholder over here, what is the mission and vision of this particular organization is what is important, first thing. Next one, there is something called inflation that is actually spoken in this article. So inflation as a concept is very important for your examination. Okay, it can either come in your prelims examination or in your mains. So here it is important for us to know what is inflation, what are the different types of inflation, what are the policies, I mean what are the guidelines or the policies that the Reserve Bank of India actually follows in order to actually keep inflation under control. Exactly, this is what you need to know. Okay, and what kind of impact that this particular inflation has on the overall economy, or inflation somewhere else, what impact does that actually have on India. So this is the basic thing you need to actually learn from this particular article. So here retail inflation is actually important, that is retail inflation, wholesale inflation, all that becomes important. So this particular topic is very important from your prelims perspective under economy, and under mains perspective it is under GS paper 3 economic development. So now let us actually move forward. So here the Asian Development Bank has actually revised its inflation projection for India. See, there are a lot of organizations which actually give their projection on, what will be the GDP growth of India, what will be the inflation growth of India, and what has India done in order to control it, and global efforts, what are the global efforts, all that, generally actually comes up. So here similarly, Asian Development Bank usually projects the inflation as well as the what to say, the GDP of India. Over there it has actually said that due to increasing food prices, it has actually revised the method for projecting this particular inflation, whereas it has kept its GDP projection the same. So however, this is actually not important, as I told you. So what is important is, in order to understand what is this Asian Development Bank, this becomes very important for the exam. So here you need to know what is this ADB. First of all, Asian Development Bank, right? Asia, a region. So it is a regional development bank. It was established in 1966 in order to promote the economic growth as well as the cooperation in which region? The Asia Pacific region. Again, important. Then what is its objective? It provides loans. It also provides technical assistance, and it actually provides grants to the member countries for development projects as well as initiatives which are overall, aimed at reducing the poverty as well as improving the infrastructure of this region. So this is what is very important. Now, any kind of organization, who are all the members? Again, important. So ADB has 68 members, where 49 are actually regional and 19 non-regional, with Japan and US as the top shareholders. Very important, okay? Because here, shareholding and who actually possesses the highest stake, this has already been asked in your UPSC once in the prelims examination. Okay, so you have Japan and US as top shareholders with around 15.571% each, and this is followed by China 6.429% and India 6.317. Okay, and here you have the board of governors with representatives from each member country. They actually serve the highest authority here. And next point is, while ADB primarily focuses on, we saw, right, it actually finances and supports development and infrastructure in region. Also, it is involved in other works like economic research and provides analysis. That is what we saw, right? It is actually projecting the inflation rate of India. So how does it do it? It actually does not directly collect the inflation data, and ADB uses the available national statistics, okay, to forecast the inflation trends and assess the economic conditions in its member countries, therefore offering the policy guidance as well as insights in order to control inflation. So this is what we need to understand about this particular organization of ADB. Now, what is more important for your examination is to understand the inflation trends in India. Very, very important. So now let us get into what is inflation and how has been the inflation trends in India. Okay, so first of all, what do you mean by inflation? It is the increase in the general price levels of the goods in an economy. So what happens if there is a particular good, and if there is an increase, for example, this pen is a good, okay, so when, if it is actually 5 rupees today and gradually it increases to 10, 15, etc., and this actually takes place in an economy, this is called as, so the general price level increase in an economy of a good is called as inflation. So first, now we've actually understood what is the meaning of inflation. This is actually general increase in the price level of goods. So this is called as inflation. Now moving forward, let us understand what is actually the structure of inflation in India. So retail inflation in India is measured by something called as consumer price index. Consumer price index is nothing but this actually measures the rate of increase in the price level at the consumer level of the goods that the consumer actually intakes. For example, food, fuel, clothing, housing, as well as services. So this is what CPI does, and it is an indicator of how much inflation is actually taking place at the consumer level. Okay, so this is what it is, or at the retail level. And food and beverages, they actually account for nearly 45% of the CPI basket, and thereby it actually acts as a significant driver of the overall inflation. Now moving ahead, it is important for us to know what are the factors influencing the food inflation. Okay, first one is supply side constraints. So what do you mean by supply side constraints? When the supply is actually less and when the demand is actually more. So when supply is less and when the demand is more, then ultimately there will be increase in the price level of a commodity. Okay, so here, why there is a supply, why the supply is actually less? There are vagaries of nature, that is weather patterns such as monsoon variability, floods are there, droughts, all this can disrupt the agriculture production, and when the agriculture production is less, what happens? It affects the supply of essential commodities such as the cereals, vegetables, fruits, etc., pulses, etc. For instance, if you see, extreme weather events such as cyclones or unseasonal rains can lead to crop damages, thereby it actually results in the supply shortages as well. Okay, so this is one of the driving factors of food inflation in India. Next one is the global commodity prices. Let us actually see how does this actually become one of the contributor of inflation. That is, India is a major importer of edible oils as well as pulses. Okay, so what happens, any kind of fluctuation that actually happens in the global prices of these commodities, driven by factors of, there are, geopolitical tensions, any kind of war, okay, near this Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea, etc., because these areas like West Asia, Central Asia, all these regions are happening to be extremely volatile. So since we depend on a lot of oil and pulses from these kind of areas, as well as major of the imports actually happen only through those sea lanes, right? So when that happens, then what happens is that there is fluctuation in the prices, there is hike in the prices. So what happens, this actually is driven by factors like geopolitical tension, trade policies, and global supply chain disruptions, and this can actually have a direct impact on the domestic food inflation as well. So as we saw the supply side constraints, the next one is the demand side pressures. Okay, so what are the demand side pressures? If, for example, I'm paid X rupee and tomorrow if I'm paid X plus 10, then what happens? My salary actually increases. So increasing or rising incomes, increasing level of urbanization, as well as changing dietary patterns of people have also led to increased demand for protein rich, that is, people are actually moving towards millets, pulses, etc., rather than only consuming wheat as well as rice. Okay, so this can actually create demand pull inflation in these particular categories. So this is what we've discussed about the driving factors. Okay, now moving to the next one, let us understand What is the monetary policy that actually India follows, and who actually brings out these monetary policy guidelines? It is the Reserve Bank of India. So you can actually see monetary policy and the role of Reserve Bank of India. So just a minute. So demand side prices are there. So here we are. So here we are discussing about RBI's inflation targeting methods. So let us actually start by discussing one by one. RBI's inflation targeting framework. The RBI actually operates under a flexible inflation targeting framework with a medium term target of around 4% of the CPI inflation. That is, it actually targets to uh, have inflation of around 4% or within a band of 2 to 6%. Okay, so this is what it is. And this framework aims to anchor the inflation expectations and also provide a stable economic environment. And so when the inflation is under control, that is where we can actually expect about economic growth and so on. So that is what it is. And for that, there is a framework which is actually brought about by a committee. This is nothing but the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI that actually meets bi-monthly in order to review the inflation trends and the economic indicators. And also this MPC actually sets the policy rates. These policy rates are very, very important for your examination. Okay, so here you have the repo rate, the reverse repo rate, etc. What do you mean by repo rate? Repo rate is nothing but a particular interest rate at which the commercial banks borrow from the RBI. That is called as a repo rate. The reverse repo rate is what? It is the same thing. It is the vice versa. Here it is a particular interest rate. So here I actually told you repo rate is important for your examination, where it is a particular interest rate where the banks actually borrow from the RBI. So this is again very, very important. Similarly, the reverse of it actually becomes the reverse repo rate. So here this is also important for the examination. Now moving forward, we will actually see, yeah. The next one is repo rate adjustments, that is policy tools for inflation control. What are these? First one I told you, repo rate. So here it is actually explained properly. 1 minute. Here. So the repo rate is nothing but the rate at which the RBI lends to the commercial banks. This is called as repo rate. Okay. So when the repo rate, that is the rate of interest at which the banks actually borrow from the RBI, if this actually increases, then what happens? Borrowing becomes very, very costly. So this actually arrests the liquidity or the liquid money in the economy, and this is actually used as a tool in order to control your inflation. So this is what it is. So by increasing the repo rate, the RBI actually makes borrowing costlier, thereby reducing liquidity and cooling down the demand driven inflation. Conversely, if you see a reduction in the repo rate, in case the repo rate is actually decreased, what happens? It actually expands. That is, there is more liquid cash in the economy. So that makes the credit cheaper, stimulating the economic activity. The next one is open market operations. What do you mean by open market operations? This is a phenomenon where the RBI actually buys or sells the government bonds, securities, etc. in the open market in order to regulate the money supply. For example, if there is too much liquidity in the economy, then what happens? The RBI actually sells the security to the consumer and gets the money, thereby limits the amount of liquidity or liquid money in the economy, and thereby this actually controls the increase in the inflation also. So this tool is used to manage the liquidity conditions and influence the short term interest rates. The next one is the cash reserve ratio and the statutory liquid ratio. Okay, so the RBI accordingly can also adjust the CRR as well as the SLR requirement for the banks in order to control the money supply and ensure the financial stability. So what do you mean by cash reserve ratio? Cash reserve ratio is nothing but it is a particular amount of money that a bank must have as a reserve in the RBI. So that is called as cash reserve ratio, and statutory liquidity ratio is what a bank has to maintain in terms of liquid cash, gold, it can be security, etc. So that is called as your SLR, and this can actually be changed accordingly, that is increased or decreased in order to control the money supply and also to ensure the financial stability. Okay, so this is what it is. Now, yeah, India has not signed any of the previous. There has been a doubt asked by Prashant, like has India signed any of the above nuclear agreements or not? No, India is actually not a signatory of any of the agreements, and so here with this we've actually done with this particular topic as well from the economy section. So yeah, so as I told you, these are the different what you say products that we've actually come across. Okay, so these are different books that we actually have written for your betterment in the preparation of your examination. So the like this, we actually come up with more such important topics every day so that it is easier for you to understand, and it is better to always have an interactive session. So those who actually followed us today in the live session, please do inform your fellow friends in order to join, so that it's going to be more interactive and we will actually get to solve your doubts then and there. So thank you for watching, and for more live updates and more such videos, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. We'll catch you soon. Until then, take care and goodbye.